right, Matthew chapter 25. Hallelujah. You ready? Starting in verse 14. For be like a man going on a journey who called to his servants and entrusted to them his property. To one he gave 5 talents, to another two, to another one, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. And he who had received 5 talents went at once and traded with them. And he made 5 talents more. So also he who had 2 talents made 2 talents more. But he who had received the 1 talent went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. Now, after a long time, the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. And he who received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 talents more, saying, Master, you delivered to me 5 talents. Here, I have made 5 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. And he also who had 2 talents came forward, saying, Master, you delivered to me 2 talents. Here, I have made 2 talents more. And his master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. He also who had received the 1 talent came forward, saying, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, gathering where you scattered no seed, so I was afraid, and went and hid your talent in the ground. Here, you have what is yours. But his master answered him, You wicked and slothful servant. You knew that I reap where I have not sown and gather where I have sowed no seed. Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and at my coming I would have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to him who has the 10 talents. For everyone who has, for to everyone who has, more will be given, and he will have an abundance. And from the one who is not, even what he has will be taken away. And cast the worthless servant into the outer darkness. In that place, there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Okay, great story. Not particularly communist in its themes or ideas. I'm just kidding. All right. I mean, I'm not really kidding, but let's think about this. Okay, you're familiar with the story. Let's skip kind of the first order ideas that people generally teach when they teach about this story. I want to focus on the servant that had the 1 talent and really kind of messed it up. And so the question is why? The question is why? And was he less capable than the others? Yes, that's why he had the one. We told at the beginning of the story that they were given to each according to their ability, right? So he was less capable than the others. But that's not the point. Because though he was less capable, the master also expected less out of him. So it's not a matter of, who's more gifted, who's more anointed, who's smarter, who went to the better school, who started with more money in life. It like those things are irrelevant because God knows what you have and what he expects of you is proportionate to the things that you've been given, the things that you have access to. Okay? That's not the point. The point is revealed sort of later in the story, right? When the master comes and he gives an account, um, he's asked to give him account, and I think it's really interesting what he says because it helps us understand uh, what he thinks. And he says, "Master, I knew you to be a hard man." Oh, so it's not about him; it's about his master's flaws. Reaping where you did not sow and gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid, and that's the key line there. I was afraid. And I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here, you have what is yours. And if I could summarize what it is that he's saying in a way that it doesn't necessarily feel particularly Christiany, um, the third servant is scared of taking risks. I'm more aware of what he could lose. And in fact, so aware of what he could lose that he doesn't take the opportunity to actually gain anything. And the master obviously rebukes him. And one of the things that he rebukes him for is like, if you knew that I gather where not so and I want things that are not mine, you should at least put my money with the bankers. And I don't know how many of you studied economics in school. I guess it's not that many. But if you have a background in banking and you sort of understand the nature of banking, then this statement is actually extremely interesting. And one of the reasons it's interesting is because um, putting your money in the bank is literally the safest place to put your money, for a few different reasons. For almost every economy that functions very well, you need a banking system that is extremely, extremely secure. And I don't want to get into that, but if you understand that, then you understand that what the master's saying is that even if you took essentially no risk, that you would have gotten something back for what you had. But the fear of taking risk kept you from gaining the thing that was actually essentially riskless. And I don't know if that is uh, a way of expressing it that really makes sense. But you can be so scared of taking risk that something that was free to you don't. actually reach out and take because you're just that scared of losing the things that you have. And what makes the third servant different from the other two is not that he's less capable, that he's less smart, that the master doesn't like him as much, or any of those things. Of even though they did have different abilities and different stewardships, but what made him different from the others is that he had no tolerance for risk. Now, if I were to ask you, or if really anybody were to ask you, like, what are the great, what are the greatest sins that a man could commit? And you might say something about, sexual sin or stealing or fraud or murder or something like that. You probably not say a lack of appetite for risk. In fact, for Christians, not liking risk is something that we tend to think of as being a good thing, right? Like, yeah, I don't gamble because that's a sin. Um, and we don't. And I'm not encouraging gambling. I don't think that gambling is a good idea. The expected probability. Anyways, negative expected value gambling. So, not saying that gambling is a good idea. But the point is, though, that like as a Christian, we've internalized this idea that like not taking risks is a very good thing, and that taking risks is a very bad thing. But the master looks at the servant who's incapable and unwilling to take risks and scared of taking risks, and he calls him evil. And I don't know if that like makes any sense, but like hiding in the ground is not righteousness. That's the whole point of the story, in fact. The whole point of the story is that your job is not to stay safe, that your job is to do well with the things that have been given to you, and that necessarily requires that you take risks. I want to sort of ask a question that I'm going to try to think about in the context of what we're talking about today. Um, what makes something authentic? Well, that's kind of a weird question, right? They're like, um, people are all over, Christians, obviously, also people outside, looking for, I think, things that are considered to be authentic. They want something that is authentic. Almost nobody wants something that is fake. Well, the kids, I think, enjoy things that are fake, like Disneyland. But for the most part, as you grow up, you want to experience authentic things, right? Like when you go to the zoo and they have a plastic statue of a panda, that's not as awesome as if they had a real panda, right? Or are you like, wow, I really love that panda effigy that you've got, sort of going on there. When you go to the zoo and they say, sorry, rhino exhibit closed today, but they put a fake rhino out there, you don't see all the tourists snapping pictures of the fake rhino, do you? Not particularly, because people are much more interested in things that are real. And that's true about, sort of like every area in life. But one of the more interesting things actually to try to understand is like how do you actually maintain something that is real and to keep it from being something that is fake? So I'll give you an example, right? So in Africa, there's a big economy that is the tourism industry, especially around sort of safaris. And there's a tribe in Kenya that is has become sort of very famous for being like a safari destination. There, I don't want to say the name, but if you're into safari tourism, you would definitely know their name. And people pay lots and lots of money to go and to visit this tribe. And they hire guys from this tribe, and the tribe takes them into the safari, and they see the rhinos and the gorillas and the elephants and stuff. It's really cool. And I was at a travel conference this week, and was talking to a company that does tours in Africa, and they specifically said, and they said, we don't work with this tribe. And I said, that's weird. I mean, that's interesting, but that's weird, because everybody else does, and they're kind of like the most famous name in safari tourism. And they said, yeah, we don't work with this tribe because everything that when you go into one of their villages, everything is staged. And, you wouldn't know that as a tourist, you wouldn't necessarily know that because the houses look real and the people look real and, "Oh, look, the women are, grinding the corn." It all looks very real, but the reality is it's all staged, and the reason it's all staged is because they've been so famous become so famous, and there are tourists that are coming through every single day, Americans with their, SLRs, snacking, with their iPhones, and, even though it looks real, it's not real. That's not really the people's lives, and they none of these they don't live in these villages anymore. They don't live in these houses anymore. They don't actually use the stick to grind the corn or any of that stuff. It's all become fake over the years slowly because they're tourists that in their safari jeeps that drive through every single day. And so the clothes are put on, they're just for show, and the corn that's just for show, and they get paid, and they're all actors, and off season they're not really there, right? And they don't actually wear these things. And so they were like, no, we work with these other tribes because they haven't been exposed to the tourism industry. So when you go there, that you're actually seeing the way that people live and the way they raise their children and things like that. And it's just a more quote unquote authentic experience, right, than the one that is fake. And so that's like a really interesting sort of insight, and also, frankly, a real pattern in the sort of the way that life happens. There are a lot of things that start off being extraordinarily authentic in the sense that like there's no reason to want to fake it or try to fake it. And in fact, if you wouldn't even know how to fake it if someone were to ask you to fake it, do you know? What happens over time as that thing becomes repeated and that thing becomes institutionalized and that thing becomes its own thing, that the authenticness of it leaves. It's removed until you just sort of like really down to this shell, which is practice, right? So everybody knows, very famous. I don't want to say everybody knows because we all have different backgrounds, but if you read Revelation, you studied the seven letters to seven churches. You remember the first letters to the church of Ephesus, right? Where Jesus tells them, "Yeah, return to your first love, otherwise I will come and I will take this lamp from you." What's amazing about that is that if you're a student of the New Testament, you knew that the Church of Ephesus was the church that experienced the quote unquote greatest revival in the New Testament. Like it was there that they burned 20,000 shekels of silver worth of witchcraft books. It was there that Paul saw probably the greatest outbreak in his ministry. It was there that John was there and Timothy ministered there, and Aquila and Priscilla were from there. Ephesus is known in the New Testament as being that great place of where God did extraordinary things. And so that if you are aware of that context, then it is surprising that a generation later, sometime around 96, 98 AD, that the Lord is speaking to John, to the church of Ephesus, and he tells him, "You need to return to your first love, because what you're doing now, it's not real anymore. It's not real anymore." And you would notice this sort of everywhere. Um, in ministry, one of the reasons that people love to listen to people speak or things like that is because they believe that there's an authentic connection with God. There are not a lot of people that get into ministry and at the very beginning didn't love God. I mean, yes, I'm sure there are some people that are drafted into it because that's what their dad did and that's what their grandfather did. And okay, sure, sure. There's some like that. But many people they start their church already is fire. Just like we know a lot of students when they get started in on campus or like they're freshmen, they really do want to reach their campus. They really want that. But what's very common is that that guy builds a church. He does really well. Starts speaking at conferences, and you give it 10, 15, 20 years, and it's more about composing sermons than it is about an authentic connection with God. And the sermons can still sound really nice, really wonderful, and it can still sound really well put together. But there's something has been missing. It's kind of like the tribe that at first those tourists were just a way for them to make money. Eventually, they're just performing for the tourists, and it's not their life anymore. But they maintain the appearance of it because that's what they get paid to do. That's what they're expected to. That's what that is. Does that sort of make any sense? And the how are these things connected? Well, it's in some ways the thing that leads people from a genuine connection with God to a very fake religious kind of connection with God is like in the middle. It's that the unwillingness to take risks. Here's sort of what I mean. Um, when you get started, because you don't know what is right to do, you just do what is in your heart. But as you go along, you very quickly learn what is the quote unquote right thing to do. And for most people, you begin to do only that which is considered quote unquote right to do. Rather than being yourself, you become what you're told is right. And that somehow draws life out of you, draws life out of you. If you go to an investment bank or an accounting firm or a law firm or anywhere else, you'll notice that most people that are high up in the company, managing directors, vice presidents, not really worth anything at an investment bank. But don't be impressed if somebody tells you they're vice president of Morgan Stanley. But managing directors and partners at the level, those people tend to dress the same. They wear the same Ferragamo ties. They wear the same Gucci shoes. They wear the same loafers from Tod's. They look sort of very the same, like they walked out of the same catalog. And if you go to the younger ranks, the analysts actually have some style, in the way that they dress. They haven't yet been told that radical pink tie should not be worn to work. They haven't been told that shirt, the stripes in that shirt, don't quite look like they belong at Credit Suisse. Like they haven't been told that. What happens over time is that they just begin to conform like to the things around them, things that they see in the quote unquote like the right way of doing things. And the problem is with that, when you input like in a bank, whatever, they have a standard of appearance, like fine, like it's fine. But what happens when you input that into the church or like into places where relationships need to be authentic and people need to be authentic is that you don't necessarily realize when you've lost that thing that is authentic. As you know, it's like Isaiah 1 or Ezekiel, I think it's 26, where the Lord is, you can put on the robes of a priest, but not have the heart of a priest. And what happens is that over and over again, you put on that robe and you do that job and you stand before the Lord, you make that offering, or you go to the altar, you sing that song, you preach that sermon, you lead that Bible study, and you're putting on the priestly robe, but the heart has drifted and is drifting inside. And the reason for that is, again, the thing that accelerates that is the unwillingness and the inability to take risks correctly. See, taking risks it's what allows you to grow, but at the same time maintain who you are, rather than just conforming to like what you're told to be. There are a lot of industries where there's no creativity, and frankly, people are not really looking for creativity, like accountants. Nobody says, okay, if you don't employ an accountant, you may not understand this. But one day you'll probably make enough money where you do need to hire an accountant. Nobody says to themselves, you know, what I really want an accountant. I want someone who is creative. Um, no, you want someone who knows the rules, and you want that person to apply the rules correctly. That's what you want in an accountant. But if you're hiring an architect, to design a house, or interior designer to help you furnish, the home that you've bought, you don't necessarily want someone who follows the rules, correct? If you wanted someone who follows the rules, you would just buy the Pottery Barn catalog. You don't need to hire a designer. You would just buy the Architectural Digest. You just be like every piece in that setup. Well, I'll just buy. That you don't need that. Like that is easy to acquire. What is much harder to acquire is someone who has an opinion about what looks good. What is harder to acquire is someone whose opinion is actually relevant and valid. Like that's what is harder to acquire. And again, in the church, in the same way, what is easy to acquire is a set of rules that all churches follow or are supposed to follow, that in industry is called best practices. What is much harder to acquire is a community where people actually thrive in their relationship with God, where people do not look the same, but that there is a genuine, authentic connection to the Lord and an ability to express that in life, which is very, very, very often measured in their capacity to go and to take the correct risks to express that. You see this in companies that have developed over sort of long cycles, long periods of time. If you go to finance, law, accounting, like some of these different fields, like frankly, they all look very similar. If you went to the top 50 hedge funds and looked at their compliance departments, you'd probably not be able to say like this is this or that is that. Do you know? But what is interesting is how there are some companies that, like, as they grow and even as they mature, they're able to retain a certain identity that's actually very different from all their competitors, every other industry in the space. Like Apple, for instance. You know an Apple product when you see it. Apple products are like imbued with the DNA of Steve Jobs and what he thought looked good. Really, that's what you have. Like when you buy an Apple product, is you have, even though Steve Jobs has been dead for 10 years, but you have is a continuation of the vision of Steve Jobs in terms of what he thought looked good and what he thought, products should look like. And all there are probably, I don't know, 50, 100 designers at Apple that, sort of really put a stamp on their products and shape their products and make them look a certain way. And all of those guys have that DNA in them, which is why Apple products don't look different, don't look the same as products from other companies. They are unique and they're not drifting towards the rest of the industry. This is what is like pretty incredible is that like generation after generation, year after year, they're iterating, they're not staying in the same place, but they're not drifting towards the mean of the industry. Like they are maintaining a very unique identity. But if you look around at other tech companies, it's not necessarily true. There are a lot of tech companies that like they don't have an idea about how something should be designed. So their interface looks the same as every other interface, or their product looks the same as every other product. Their buttons on their website look the same as all the other buttons. And you don't have to be creative about everything. Of course, nobody can be creative about everything. You don't need to reinvent the color yellow. But there is something that is supposed to be real and to be true about you that needs to continue to express itself Even as you grow in wisdom and in maturity and understanding and righteousness in God, there's something about you that needs to continue to express itself. And that thing about you is a willingness to lose. That's how you maintain that. It's the willingness to make mistakes, to lose money in the case of this parable, to lose money, to do things that don't make sense, to not have every ministry venture work out, to like things need to not work out. Like that there needs to be a willingness to experience that if you hope to maintain yourself. And the reason, again, why do best practices exist? Like, why is there anything called a best practice? And it's because that best practice is what saves you from doing something that is wrong. That's why it's called a best practice. But people that are extraordinary never stick to just best practices. If you're a fan of tennis and you're young enough or old enough, rather, not young enough. If you're young, you wouldn't. If you're old enough, you remember Federer in his prime. And one of the most famous games ever played in tennis is Wimbledon 2008 between Federer and Nadal. And these are the two best players in the world in their prime. And what is extraordinary when you look at that game is that they are completely different. They're completely they're the way they swing, the way they run, the way they approach the ball, the way they attack the ball. They're like you're just like this is like it's like a zebra and a giraffe. Like they're not at all the same. But then when you go watch a golf game, which if you don't know anything about golf, that's really tough. They all look exactly the same. It's just about accuracy. And watch tennis is not. They're completely different. And what's also stunning is that like if you were going to learn tennis from scratch, no tennis coach would have told you, "Oh yeah, go swing like Nadal," because like it would never have been. And yet, like to get to that place, you cannot swing your racket the way that your neighborhood tennis coach, that all neighborhood tennis coaches in America teach kids to swing their rackets. That's called best practice. But if you want to get to that place, you really have to obtain that there's something about you that has to be retained in order for you to sit in that place. It was yesterday. I got in a lift and I was going to the airport, and this guy, a lot of Lyft drivers, they they can see that I don't really want to have a conversation. I'm not one of those people that likes to have like I don't turn to the person sitting next to me on the plane and it's like, hey, you know, what about you? Like, where are you? No, sorry, like that's not. I'm not that social. I should learn to be, but I'm not. So this guy, um, he gets in the conversation. And he just starts the the moment I get in the car, he's like starts the conversation. I see you going to the airport. Oh, you fly United. Oh, like I mean, just no, what do you do for a living? Guess what I do for a living? I'm like, no, I'm not that particularly interested. Okay, but anyways, so he's doing this, and he's like this really engaging guy. He's in his thirties, he's a Hispanic. He's a refugee. He's telling me about his life story and blah blah blah. So we're sort of going along, right? And then he gets done telling me about being a real estate broker, and then he says, "Hey, can I tell you a story?" I'm like, "Sure. Yeah, I'll hear a story. I've got 25 minutes here. I got nothing to do." And he's like, "Dude," he's like, "Bro, the other day I had an effing Karen in my car." And I'm like, "Oh, Jesus, this is." And then he tells me about this Karen who's not actually a Karen. I feel like all women that are like demanding now being called Karens, she's not actually a Karen, but he was like telling me about this Karen, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, "Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, that was a tough situation. I'm so sorry about that." Anyways, so so yeah, we keep going, and then he's telling me about this Karen, and then he's done telling me about Karen. So then he tells me like all the good things that he tries to do in life. He says, brother, I buy a car every single year, I fix it up, then I give it away to somebody, and he says, I just really believe in like investing in other people, and blah blah blah. And then he starts telling me about serving in his church, and he starts telling me about how much God has blessed him, starts telling me about how much God loves him, and like all these different things, right? And then because I'm a Christian, I like respond with Christian. I mean, I'm not trying to like be like, oh, I'm a Christian. Really, I'm just trying to keep myself. But he figures out that I'm a Christian. So then because of the way I respond, so then he's more about this Christian stuff and like how much he loves God and how God is so good to him. But all this starting with him telling me about his effing Karen, that he taken for a ride the other day. And God is doing good things for him. He feels so blessed this way, that way, the other way, this neighbor, blah, 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 the whole thing. And as I get to the airport, and then he's like, "Oh, brother, this is such a great ride. I feel like I made a real brother. We were sitting there as real brothers." And I'm like, this is absolutely fantastic. Because you never get to church, and first of all, nobody ever use the F word. Second of all, nobody would ever be telling us, like, you never be like, "Hey, let me tell you a story about that Karen that I met the other day." It's just not the sort of thing you do. It's not the sort of thing you do. And yet, there's something, it's very challenging to describe this. It's very challenging to describe this. And you can't talk about it in most churches. That's why you're here. But like, it's very challenging to describe this. But that guy, there's something real about him. He's not trying to conform to any image of what it means to be a Christian. He actually is grateful for God. He's grateful that God brought him to America. He's grateful that God is blessing his real estate company. He's grateful that God has given him a car. It's an old Corolla. It's not worth more than $5,000, but he's grateful for that. And he gives away, or he sells his cars at a loss every single year after he drives them for Lyft, for about a year, so that somebody less fortunate than him in his community can have a car. Usually an older gentleman or something like that. He'll do that every single year. He's done that for a while. And he goes to his church, he's engaged with that, and he doesn't look in any way like a polished Christian the way that, people would expect you to look. God is not looking just for our ability to get rid of all the idiosyncrasies about ourselves so that we can conform to the image of a priest with the right robe and the staff and and the hat, all that stuff. He's not interested in that. But he's interested in people who are authentic and unique because God has created you that way. In order for you to be that, you have to be willing to take risks. You have to be willing to express yourself. That does not mean, and I understand, like, in saying this, people think that everything that they want in life is like them taking a risk and expressing themselves. Like, I want to smoke. Well, that's no, it's not. I want to marry that guy that, yeah, he drinks too much, but that's no, that you need to know where the boundary is. You need to know where the boundary is between foolishness and wisdom. Okay, you need to, but you also need to be able to identify when the authentic who you are authentically, the life of the Holy Spirit that is inside of you is being drained because you're being forced to conform. You can't talk a certain way because you're supposed to be a Christian. You can't think a certain way because you're supposed to be a Christian. And what is really incredible is how many places you can go where everybody's a Christian and there's no life in the building. There's no life in the building. There are movies that you can watch where, like, you would not at all agree with the ethics of the people that are in that movie, and yet you would be jealous is not the right word, but you would recognize that there appears to be. I know they're all actors, okay, but they're depicting something that has like genuine, like a community that people would genuinely want to be a part of, right? Like Fast and Furious. Like nobody likes the ethics of the people, the cast of that movie, and yet they all seem like real and genuine family. That there's something like very real there, do you know? And there's something that cannot be manufactured when everybody is worried about how am I being perceived? What do people think of me? Did I say the right thing? Did I curse? Should I not have? Did I use the S word? Of course, like should I not? I'm not encouraging anybody to cuss. I don't think that you shouldn't. However, at the same time, worrying about that is not the way to get to who God has created you to be. You are in the world. The guy that made 5 talents, he went to go trade. Who did he trade with? Not in the church, probably. He probably went to go do business in the world. And when you do that, there's just it's life. And the thing about God is it's just one day the rest of you will have kids too. Some of you already have the rest of you probably will also have, unless you're called to be self. Okay, but like the vast majority, you're gonna have kids, and you're gonna understand that like when they go to the playground, they get dirty. That's part of going to the playground. When God calls us to be in the world, He has commanded us. He's placed us in the world, not in a cave on the side of a mountain, but he's called us to be in the world. He understands that like that means something. You're going to get dirty when you play at the playground. You're gonna have to wash your clothes. Like you have to learn to do that. That should not like rob you of that thing that actually God has put inside of you, which is that joy, that excitement, that life, that there's something about you that you should be you. Do you know? Yes, there are times where you put on the uniform. Of course, sure, no problem. But you cannot lose who you yourself are. I was watching a TV show a while ago, and some of you are not going to like this at all, which is exactly why I want to. But okay, and yeah. Anyways, okay. So watching a TV show a while ago, and there's this guy, and he had got a new girlfriend. This is not about. It's not a romantic TV show at all. It was about something else. But it just there's just one episode where he gets a girlfriend. Okay, and so they'd been childhood friends. And anyways, after a long time, and he is a smoker because he has a job that is quite stressful, and so he smokes as part of his character. He smokes, and she is a nurse. And one day, they're both going off to work, and he drops her off at the hospital where she's working as a nurse. And he, after dropping her off, stands outside the hospital to light up a cigarette and have a smoke. Okay, so she goes off to work, and he's all like, like, oh, I'm in a relationship now, kind of, weird, gooey face. Very good acting, by the way. And And so he's there smoking. And and then, the camera stays on him smoking. And then after, I don't know, about 10 seconds, she comes, she like runs back, she sucks on his cigarette, and then kisses him, and then runs off again. And it's a very interesting scene. You go, oh my God, a nurse. Okay. It was a very interesting scene, and uh, um, very well composed. And I was like, wow, this is actually genius, that somebody thought of this. And there's many reasons why this is genius. And one of the reasons why it's genius is because, as a nurse, you obviously, like, okay, those are the people that you, doctors, nurses, those are the people that you at least in front of a hospital. I mean, come on, right? But there's something about where she crosses from her side of, like, from her world to his world, and shares with them in that, even something that's like we all know is like, okay, like you obviously you would never do that. Yeah, you would never allow one of your friends to light a cigar and be like, "You want me?" Be like, "Yeah, sure." No, you would never. I know you would never. You're too good of Christians to do anything of the sort. But there's something about that like reaching out to the side, doing something that's completely, totally different from you, that suggests that there's real connection. That like I'm committed to this relationship. This is real. That there's something good and profound about that. And there's something that like people desire relationships of that variety, not just relationships where we follow all the rules all the time. Do you know? But it's like you desire relationships with that. That's what makes a relationship feel real to most people. That's what makes connection, friendship, um, that's what makes it feel real to most people. It as much as I think that, you know, Thursday night Bible studies that run from 6 to 8, where everybody shows up at 5:59, everybody leaves at 8:01. As much as I love those, because that's Christianity, as we all know, there's something about that that just doesn't feel quite as alive as like even in the world, parties and hangouts, and there's something about that that doesn't quite feel as alive. It feels like you're conforming, but it's not just the conformity. It's that like I'm not. There's no risk taking in this. No risk taking in this, and we don't necessarily think that risk taking is good, which is why we tolerate like this sort of buildup. Like, where do we hang out? Christian conferences. What Christian conferences are we allowed to go to? Well, the Bethel one, the Upper Room one, the Jesus Image one. What else? That's it. Okay. There's something about that that it doesn't drive deep connection, do you know? And and what and I'm not suggesting this as like an example, but there's something about like, hey, what do you want to do? I don't know. Let's just take off and go to Nova Scotia for the day. There's something about just actually having ideas, actually desiring to do something. Like, let's just build a 3-story treehouse. There's something about like just not needing to seem reasonable and right and safe and like all the time to everyone that makes you who you are. God has not made you just to follow best practices all the time everywhere. He's actually put little sparks inside of you, ideas that nobody else has, quirks that you can't really replicate in other people, um, preferences, opinions, styles. It's just different, you know? Like, I'm not dressed the way that Janet dresses or the way that Joanne, well, I mean, but for they're women, but like, even if they were not women, like, I would not dress the way that they are, but that doesn't make it wrong for them to do that. Not only does it not make it wrong, it is essential that they remain who they are. But not just about like the things that we can see, that like there's things in the heart, the way that we speak, the preferences that we have, the way that we go about do life, that there's really essential that you figure out. We're not talking about sin. Don't like wander off into sin, but that there's something in you that is like a risk-taking capacity in you. And that has to be expressed because it was created by God. It's not that's created by God. For many people, the end of that capacity is to make more money for themselves or to like be famous, whatever. Okay. You have no tolerance for that. But if you shape your heart correctly, you posture your heart before the Lord, what you'll realize is that like that desire to take risks doesn't go away. It actually increases. It's just that the nature of the risk you're taking is a risk that makes your master wealthy. It's not a risk that, where it's like, okay, I'm gonna own 6 houses. Who cares? It's a risk that like it bears fruit for your master. It does something in your relationship with God. It brings life to the people around you. It's the sort of thing that no budget committee would ever allow. It's a sort of thing that, like, no, nobody would ever say this is the best way to do this, and yet it's in your heart to do it, and you could fail. In fact, you would likely fail. It would be very hard. It would take a long time. There's no straight road, but that is what you've been created for. Um, Most people try to um, shape our road so that it is like very straight, never winds, is completely safe, and then when we're 65, we get to retire, with a very nice pension. That will kill you. And not only will it kill you, but there's something about that you're not going to feel like this is a great life that I've lived. But you just have to be like, there are things that like nobody else, the things that nobody else, would advise me to do, but I just want you to do. There are adventures that I want to take. They're just that has to come out. And that cannot if you don't express this elsewhere, you're just gonna need to express this in taking vacations, which is not the right way to express it. Like in everyday life, in the way that you shape your life, allow really allow yourself to be real. Really allow yourself to be real. We are sometimes so very scared of what people think of us and so very scared of sinning or like falling short in God's eyes. We forget there's a reason that God has mercy for us. There's a reason that like the grace of God exists. And if we were all just to be, put on the robes, put on the suit, yeah, do what we're supposed to do, you would have no need for mercy or grace. But the reason you have that is because you have been called and created to be different than just what people consider to be best practice, to this be the safest way. And I want to really encourage you to go and to be that thing that is different. You know, 2 Corinthians chapter 11. No, actually, let's start with chapter. Yes, let's do chapter 11. 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 12. And what I'm doing, this is Paul speaking, and what I am doing, I will continue to do in order to undermine the claim of those who would like to claim that in their boasted mission they work on the same terms as we do. For such men are false apostles, deceitful workmen, disguising themselves as apostles of Christ. This is a very interesting sentence. Obviously, in the New Testament, false apostles, false teachers, false prophets are things that the apostles they talk about very often. There are people that are false. How do you become something that is false? You have to try to imitate that which is real without actually being that thing. You have to wear the right clothes, you have to say the right things, you have to go do the right things, but it's not real inside of you. Does that sort of make any sense? Okay. Be an actor. And no wonder, verse 14, for even Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. So it is no surprise that his servants also disguise themselves as servants of righteousness. Their end will correspond to their deeds. How do you avoid being a false apostle or false? You just don't fake anything. You just don't fake anything. Really get this. How do you avoid being a false prophet? You just don't need to pretend anything. Do not get into a habit in your life where you get used to saying something because that's what people expect you to say, do something because that's what people expect you to do, wear something because that's what people expect you to wear, run your career in a certain way because that's what people tell you the way you should run your career. Like, don't get used to that. And it'll be very easy for you never to be anything fake, you know? Let's keep going. 16, I repeat, let no one think of me as selfish, but even if you do, accept me as a fool, so that I too may boast a little. What I am saying with this boastful confidence, I say not as the Lord, but as a fool. Since many boast according to the flesh, I too will boast. For you gladly bear with fools, being wise yourself. For you bear it if somebody makes slaves of you, or devours you, takes advantage of you, or puts on airs, or strikes you in the face. To my shame, I must say, we were too weak for that. What Paul is saying here, which you should come back and think about later, is that the Corinthian church had great tolerance for religious conformity. In fact, they loved it. But Paul's saying that that was not his aim. Do you know? But whatever anyone else dares to boast of, I am speaking as a fool. I also dare to boast of that. Are they Hebrews? So am I. Are they Israelites? So am I. Are they offspring of Abraham? So am I. Are they servants of Christ? I am a better one. I am talking like a madman, with far greater labors, far more imprisonments, with countless beatings, often near death. 5 times I received at the hands of the Jews 40 lashes minus one. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked. And night and day I was adrift at sea, on frequent journeys, in danger from rivers, in dangers from robbers, danger from my own people, danger from Gentiles, dangers in the city, dangers in the wilderness, danger at sea, danger from false brothers, in toil and hardship, through many a sleepless night, in hunger and thirst, often without food, in cold and exposure. Well, being an apostle is really great, is it not? The false apostles is what Paul's saying. The people that call themselves who are not apostles did not live this life. They just put on the airs. They just put on the airs. And if you get used to that, putting on airs, then you'll put on airs like you, like every area of your life, fake experts. Like everybody with a ChatGPT account can pretend to be an expert in just about any field. That doesn't actually make you an expert. Fake experts. You can be a fake apostle. It's not that hard. You just put on the right stuff, you say the right words, you share the right stories. That's not what's challenging. What's challenging is the heart, what Paul talks about, his experience, what he was willing to go through for this calling, which other people are not willing to go through. 28. And apart from the other things, there's a daily pressure on me of my anxiety for all the churches. Who is weak and I'm not weak? Who is made to fall and I'm not indignant? Okay, I want to sort of just end here, but I want to think about this verse and then we'll call it for the day. There's very often this idea that if I'm doing the will of God, that everything, everything's just going to work out. It's going to be glory and sunshine and roses. And Paul in 2 Corinthians chapter 11 especially disabuses you of that notion that serving God is about everything working out. And my favorite verse of all these, of all the things that he says, in hunger and thirst without food, like clothes, like all this stuff, I really love it. Sacrifice, of course we have to make it. Living for God, for nothing else, of course we have to do that. But in verse 28, think about this. And apart from other things, there's the daily pressure on me of my anxiety for all the churches. There's no one that you could talk to that is a believer that would say that anxiety is a good thing, correct? Anybody think anxiety is a good thing? Should we have anxiety? No? Oh, okay, sorry. I just want to make sure that we're on the same page. Okay. Nobody you talk to would think that anxiety is a good thing. And yet Paul's confessing about himself. He says, every day I have great anxiety about all the churches that I've planted, all the churches. And just think about that for a minute. And what he's saying is that despite this great ministry, despite all the sacrifices made, despite all the choices made, despite all the obedience, all the faith, all the miracles, all that other stuff, that he in himself is not going to pretend that it's easy or that everything's straightened up in here. He feels anxiety that his churches are still doing well. Why? He can't see them. He can't talk to them. They're far away from each other. He's not there. He has anxiety in himself about all that. That confession that he makes here, you'd be like, well, then Paul, you're not a particularly mature Christian. Like this, it's sentiments like this that show you that he's a real man, that he feels real turmoil inside of him, that he's going on doing these things and he is suffering. God is not pulling him out of prison every time. Yes, there's that one story at Philippi where, the earthquake and, he's pulled out. But Paul also sits in prison other times and he is completely abandoned by everybody that he knows except Timothy. Do you know? And so it's not like everything's working out. And outside, it's not like everything's working out. Inside, it's not like everything is working out. So what makes Paul great? It's his capacity to continue to go and to take that risk and to obey God day after day after day, even though it doesn't look like things are working out here. Nothing feels good in here, but he's still going out and taking that risk because he believes that he's walking right, walking out that will of God correctly. Do you know? There are plenty of people that will tell you that if you ever walk into fear, you know that's not where the Lord has called you to. It's just like there are plenty of people that would tell you, you would never smoke, no matter how it makes the other person feel. But there's just something about an authentic life where I don't know. There's something in you that is different, separate, special, unique, some spark. It will not always look reasonable. Yes, you'll make mistakes as you try to express it, but you cannot let that thing die. And Paul, anxiety is not the sort of thing that would be like, yeah, we should have some. But it keeps him alive. It keeps him going. It keeps him like pushing forward. Would I wish it on you? Of course not. But then again, that is a difference between the things that, we're like, yeah, these are sort of things that we want. But then there's a reality of life where like, this is what we actually are. And as we are, we press into God day by day by day. And the hope is not that He just fixes us and makes us this, model of something, but that's not it. It's that He keeps us alive in that, and He grows us in that, and He shapes us in that, and He continues to make us unique in that place. So that we will not look like every other Christian in the world, dress the same, look the same hat, same pin, same. But oh, that who you are would just come alive as you really know God and really experience Him and believe in Him. Do you know? I don't want anyone to sin or to believe that like we're okay with sinning. It's not. You're not. We're not okay with that, obviously. But at the same time, you do not need to pull so much like out of yourself because you think it's what God wants. God has mercy for you. He also has grace for you. The Holy Spirit is strong. He really is. Keep your heart connected to Him, but then like live a little, you know, and just allow Him to continue shaping you, but not in such a way that it's like you're none or something. Because there's no life. There's no. I'm serious. Like there's no life in that. There's no life in that. It's like I hide my hair and I just like there's no. If being a nun were so great, the world would be running towards convents, and they're not because they see more life outside than inside, and that is something that is don't want you to lose it. All right. Okay, let's stand. Cindy, come please, and bring this thing to a close.